Welcome back to Your Questions Answered, another episode of FSUFO.
Forbidden Science.
With your co-host, Justin Brown, and host with the most, Mr. Chris Stiles. We're coming back at you, picking up where we left off, talking about Martin Willis for episode 12, 10 years and counting. The episode we gave a little teaser that Martin is coming up here to the Great White North to replace a guest that left the UFO Expo, coming to the South Shore. Just quickly, Chris, maybe you could just talk to the guest quickly about the event, and then we can go into the listener questions.
Yeah, I'll keep this real brief there. Yes, there is an event coming. That's one word for it. This first weekend of October 2022, we are putting on the SHAG Harbour UFO Festival Expo, pardon me, in Yarmouth at the Grand Hotel.
Exciting.
And it is going to be exciting because here's the lineup sort of thing. There's a number of fun things planned for the Friday night and an introduction of the speakers. All the speaker stage presentations are going to be done in one day on the Saturday. And that guest list will include, well, I'll be there. I'll be probably up flapping my gums for a bit. But we have a real star-studded bunch here coming. We have Debbie Ziegelmeyer, who is from Missouri, just outside St. Louis, state supervisor there with MUFON, an author. You see her on TV quite a bit, MUFON diver. And, she's going to do a presentation. We are going to have David Marler, the big triangle military behind the scenes guy in UFOs. Real serious guy. I can't wait to meet him. David and I have not met. We've chatted on the phone a few times. He has hung in through the cancellations and reschedulings due to COVID, and he's looking forward to coming to Nova Scotia. And him and I are certainly looking forward to meeting. We have Rob Switek, another big MUFON guy, and one of the guys who sat on the board for years with the Fund for UFO Research. He was to be my project manager if I'd done a second project with them, which I canceled because I didn't need the funding because it was given to me by Paramount Television and Sightings and via Henry Winkler. I got his name right? Yeah. And one of the other guests is somebody you can't turn on your TV without seeing anymore, which is Nick Pope.
Yeah.
Who's coming to Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. Nick, of course, one of the former Ministry of Defense fellows that were charged with looking into UFOs in Britain, and has made such a career between his television appearances and books, etc. He's coming here, and this is your chance to get up close and personal to these people. But the recent thing, and we don't even have them on the website yet, and we don't have all the details worked out, but a little discussion with Martin Willis the other day, veteran podcaster, veteran UFO guy. He's been on this show. I've been on his, and he is coming to Yarmouth to do a stage presentation and maybe a few other things with me. The Sunday event, by the way, what we're going to do, like I said, here's the cool thing about this conference that makes it so unique. You can come there. You can meet the original witnesses at things like SHAG Harbour 67. They're going to be there. You can meet the experts of this and so many other great UFO cases and personalities. And the next day, we can't take you back through time, but we're going to take you there to the physical spots. We're going to go to the 67 crash site. We're going to go where Justin and I had this significant daytime sighting with video that he shot in 2018. Yep. We're going to go to the former secret military base at Shelburne. And I'm going to be doing a presentation out there and reveal some things for the first time about that this year that we never had before. And of course, we're going to go to the former Canadian Forces Station, Barrington Backrow. So listen, if you can do it, if you can save your pennies, if you can consider going, you want to get up and close and personal with the phenomena, the personalities, the experts, and the witnesses, where to be? First weekend of October, Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, the Grand Hotel. Love to have you.
Yeah, and get online and get the tickets soon because they're moving quickly and accommodations go quickly too. So do yourself a favor, check off on the bucket list visiting Eastern Canada because there's, first of all, stunning, And second
I'm
of all,
glad.
they have this great
Yeah,
conference.
we're getting a lot of U.S. interest, and I know a lot of the tickets sold so far have been there. And what I'm afraid is there's going to be a big surge from the U.S. because remember the ferry's back, the cat's back this
Yeah.
year, and I know the last few times they had things anything to do with Shag Harbor in the Yarmouth area. I'm thinking back to the musical Return to Shag Harbor that ran for 3 years at that very hotel, right? It was
Okay.
sold out every day. I went down for the closing performance, and oh wow, what a party that was! And I was
Oh
amazed.
boy.
I had no idea. I knew what was going on, and when they invited me to close out the show after 3 years, I thought dinner theater, yeah, whatever. There'll be some people there, maybe a few more. And while I was waiting there in the day and for the event and that, and I was asking at the staff to say, no, tickets aren't available. We've been sold out all year. And I'm really, oh yeah, everybody comes over on the ferry, whatever. And I was there at the closing event, and man, it was an event, right? So, but I'm afraid as the word spreads, and particularly Martin, because he's going to be barking about the expo because he's based out of Maine, right? And he has such a huge U.S. following, and once they realize, yes, there is a ferry again that goes to Nova Scotia, I got a feeling they're going to load up and come over. And I just hope there are tickets still available for us Canadians, locals, and anybody else who wants to come in from around the planet.
Yeah, it's usually the locals that sort of pick up on that vibe blast too. So any of you locals watching, make sure you get your tickets sooner than later. Speaking
Yeah.
of great shows and things to look forward to, I was sort of sitting here in my new homestead in New Brunswick. Not to digress, I want to move on with the show, but I was just thinking to myself, I've been so wrapped up in moving and building and selling and all this kind of stuff. In the background, you have these moments where you sort of lose yourself, and I just like stopped for a second and I said, give me a sign. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, now that I'm here. And then all of a sudden, I just started thinking about the show. And I started thinking about Chris. And I started thinking about the event coming up in the fall. And it was like the universe looked at me and it said, brother, like, get back into the game. So I'm glad I'm here for another episode of this. It's good to be back in the co-pilot seat. We're going to get right into this episode 12, the Martin Willis Show, 10 years and counting, who is a guest at the upcoming conference. The question comes from C-Style DJ. Great discussion with Martin. Love the guy. I make it a point to catch his shows each Tuesday. I just realized that a couple of years ago, I also listened to his podcast on the walks I used to take. Had no idea uh, that it was this guy. Martin has a good point with saying it helps to cross pollinate with podcasters, because if not, I would never have stumbled upon your channel. I just subscribed. Chris from Florida. Wonderful comment.
Yeah. Very encouraging. Good to hear. Love hearing from people from Florida. We have friends there. Amongst them, of course, would be the pilot that
Ah,
night in 1967, Ralph Lowinger. He was the
Ralphie.
co-pilot back then. He lives in Florida, and we're hoping that he comes to the conference. In fact, he has said he hopes to with him and his daughters. They hadn't been up since the what was it 50th anniversary, and what a
Yeah,
blast that was when they come up. Yeah,
that was a big
so
turnout.
that yeah, yeah, we have that and several other people in Florida that I think might come up, and yeah, they're such great people. God, Ralph, he sent me some great gifts over the years, and we keep in touch. And he was a guest on the show.
Yeah.
So if you haven't checked that episode out, you should.
And I
Um,
think, let's see here. I thought, yeah, there is a question coming up about that episode, so we'll get to that. This whole idea of cross pollination used to be really taboo for people in media and news and things like that, right? Because it's like you didn't want anybody to steal your
oh,
thunder. But this is a whole different era, not only in the game of UAP, but in the game of podcasting and media and social media, right? This cross pollination is really good for everybody and everything, because you're giving a little bit of light to everybody, which is personally, I think,
I think I just
really, really
saw a
helpful.
very, I think I just saw a very interesting question. They're all
Oh, is
good,
it the
but
next one? Here it is. I've
mm,
had a question from Robin. How does a device from either interdimensional or
oh my God,
extraterrestrial origin crash? If the
ah,
technology allows these ships or UFOs to have such capabilities, what goes so wrong that causes them to crash on Earth? I love this. Have fun.
maybe, maybe nothing, maybe nothing goes
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe the
Yeah.
point is they're meant to crash. Remember, this came up when we had Paolo Harris as a guest,
Yeah.
and that idea was first put forward by, of course, Jacques Vallée,
Yeah.
saying that maybe that's the point, maybe that's the mission. And
Hmm.
that may seem strange, but we only have a limited time here. I could probably go on and cook up half a dozen answers,
I know.
speculative answers, as to
Yeah.
why you might want to crash something like that.
Like
It's
directed
perhaps,
panspermia, for instance.
yeah,
Yeah.
perhaps
Let's
it's
need some info.
anyway. We're not going to do that, but perhaps they're meant to. But let me give another practical answer. Things can still go wrong, particularly with advanced technology. It certainly does with ours, and I think occasionally it can with theirs too, whoever
Yeah.
they are. Um, and superior technology, in fact, can let you down. I mean, you might have a guy with a vertical takeoff jet, and something happens, they didn't load the right amount of fuel on, and, you know, suddenly he has to land his vertical takeoff jet in the desert in Sudan, and some of the natives come up to him. Well, he's got this amazing high tech piece of equipment that's out of fuel. It's got weapons on board and all this that could probably take out other jets or half a community. But, if he's approached by natives, with a sharp knife and whatever, and they have bad intent, he's in real trouble. And that superior technology is not a lot of help in that scenario. But I actually like Valley's idea that maybe they're meant to. I even once saw a
Mhm.
cartoon. It was a great one cell thing where you see a crash saucer in the desert. It's a little line drawing. And there's a native who's coming out who's like covered in band aids and scratching his head and trying to get his wits about him. And it says, how come when these things crash, we always end up in New Mexico? Well, first of all, they're not always in New Mexico, and there are even reasons for that. We can only speculate. I suppose the most honest answer is I don't know, but um, anything high tech can go wrong. Look, we've seen that. Think about the tragedies, the dual tragedies of the shuttle program.
Mhm.
Think about so many things or commercial flights that go down. But, the farther you are from home, no matter how much with your technology, these things become more more prevalent. The other thing is we don't know what percentage of these have gone wrong because we don't know how many come.
Mhm.
Like perhaps
Yep.
this is
There's also
within
the
the normal
supposition that
range.
it's
Yeah,
interdimensional or extraterrestrial, right? Like it might be terrestrial, in fact.
but I see this is Robin McKenzie again, so I hope she enjoys me squirming for an answer that I don't really have on this one.
An
But
excellent question, though.
I think Valley's idea, and the next time I run into Robin, I'd like to go through at some length of that with her. I think that, um, you know, but I mean, of course, in the end, we really don't know. These things are all speculative. But, advanced technology is not a guarantee of success on any mission. It's not a success when you get aboard that commercial jetliner that you're going to get to where you're going and home, unfortunately. But,
Mhm.
like I say, we don't know how many of these things come here, so we don't know what percentages crash, and this could be 0.0000, or it could
Yeah.
be oops, half them. We don't know, but it's a great question. It's one that we can only speculate on in the meantime, because unfortunately, UFO researchers do not get to study UFOs. We get to study UFO reports and testimony. And
Yes.
great question.
I love it. And there's just so many different ways. That's one of my favorite questions. I'd love to divulge because there's lots of history cross culturally and of all mankind. If you dig that, there's subterranean species that, these cultures have interacted with. That's a whole other story, but it's in the mythology if you look. Moving on, we're going to the Kathleen Martin episode
Mm.
13. The end is not the end. It's a comment. It's just a quick from David Greenwell. Thanks for the interview. Delightful. And that's exactly the way I'd sum up Kathleen. She's
Yes,
wonderful. She's
yes,
great to talk to. And seven
yeah.
degrees of Kevin Bacon, maybe 2 degrees Kevin Bacon, connected to you because you were a friend of Betty over the years.
Yeah, yeah, I was. It's hard to describe that. I mean, we didn't go shopping or anything. It wasn't like that, right? But many times, And it was Betty that came to know me. The first time I ran into Betty was in her hometown of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I was presenting at a conference. This was one of the state MUFON ones that used to be put on by Peter Jeremiah. And I pulled into the parking lot and I'm walking with my suitcase to the hotel to check in. And Betty was sitting on the steps and she jumps out and goes, "There he is," and came running toward me and just talked my ear off and followed me and wanted to know if this guy or that guy was still alive in Nova Scotia and what do I think of this and that.
Yeah.
And she was very charming, and I got to get to know her fairly well, actually.
And an
Um,
unmistakable, voice.
a very unmistakable voice, and the voice, unfortunately, the only time it ever changed was in the end when she was quite sick and dealing with
Mm,
cancer, right?
yeah.
And I'm pleased to say that I got to present with her, because she used to do presentations, and this was at the Rochester, New York MUFON, in would have been July of, boy, I could be wrong here. It was the year or the year before she passed, right? And oh, she was great. And I think I talked about this before, but I always remember, man, did she put me on the spot? She was having breakfast with Kathleen at a table. But if I haven't told you, and people like that, they might enjoy this. And I was just waiting for a break at the table, and we were in the Hyatt Regency Hotel there. And there was a big clamor at breakfast, and it was hard to get a seat. And I'm waiting for a seat to appear, so I'm hovering around the table, waiting to sit down so I can get served. And Betty's holding court at the table. There's a lot of researchers around and MUFON members, and they're listening to her, and she's pronouncing judgment on everybody from Bud Hopkins to the late Bud Hopkins to
The tea.
David, yeah, to everybody involved in the phenomena, to John Mack and the professor Dave Jacobs, right?
Yep.
And she's going on about this guy's crazy and that guy. Where does he get these numbers and all this and that? And she said, he doesn't believe me anyway. And this one doesn't believe my story. It might as well be Phil Class and all this. She was going on. And she looked at me. She goes, well, ask Chris what it would take to make a difference. He doesn't believe my story. And I nearly choked. I was like, whoa, Betty, no, I never said that. She goes, no, you didn't say that, but I know you don't. I
Huh.
said, well, no, that's not exactly true. And she says, no, I'm quite all right with that. She goes, I want to know, what would it take to convince you? And I said, Betty, don't do that to me. But she wasn't going to let me off the hook. And I said to her, I said, Betty, first of all, I'm saying I'm denying it. But second of all, I said, I would say this: I would feel a lot more confident and better about your claim and any other claim if that I found the kind of evidence where somebody located a diary from before your book, before the claims of abduction in this modern era. And when I read the entries in the diary, although it would use none of the terms that have been popularized because of you and others' experiences, that when I read it, I just knew that it could be nothing but that. And she cackled and pounded the table, looked at me, and she goes, "There's wisdom." And I thought, "Wow, dodge that bullet." But she was
With
she
an
was
audience too. That's great.
she was great. Oh yeah, I can't remember. They were all sitting around the table, and I said, "Don't this to me." And of course, I'm standing, so they all looked at me, thinking, "Oh, thank God it's him, and she's picking on," and give some answer. But Betty could be like that, but she was great. I'd get calls from her occasionally, and she was a wonderful woman and charming.
Yeah, and Kathleen's been, a real great legacy
Yes,
to Betty and Barney, an interracial couple in the '60s coming out with this crazy
yes,
story, right, quote unquote,
yeah,
and, you know, uh, just an incredible part of alien
Cass,
or,
yes,
UFO history, but abduction history as well. So Kathleen, what a great episode. Just in
and
the interest of
Kathleen.
time, we're gonna have to keep going here. Episode 17, Don Bates, Beyond Euclid. Ron Halliday,
Mm,
who's really he loves the show. Here he is again. When you mentioned that this episode was going to be about older cases in Nova Scotia, I thought that
oh,
you might be discussing really old cases, like the apparent UFO sighting in New Minas in 1796. Perhaps a
oh,
future episode can dive into some of the first sightings in Atlantic Canada, and that's a great suggestion, Chris.
yeah. I don't know how much is really known about that. That was the case of the judge. I know there's a
Yeah.
write up about that in Don Ledger's
Simeon
book,
Perkins, right?
Simeon Perkins, the
Yeah,
Maritime UFO Files. Um, it is a curious sighting in that it's one of those really early ones where it's describing something that's obviously, well, from the date and time period, quite unusual, quite dramatic in the sky. Um, I don't remember it that well. I've talked about it interestingly, of course, in Liverpool because you got the Perkins Museum, which our mutual friend Linda Rayfuse is the director
mm,
of. So maybe we'll touch on that in those early cases. I think that's a great idea for a future episode, Ron.
absolutely.
And
And one of my favorite
yeah,
episodes too with Don Bates, a local guy. You know, just quickly, I had weird experiences in that area, and then finding out that Don was involved in stuff with his brother really put chills on my arms. We did mention it
mm,
in the episode, so any of these episodes we're talking about, I encourage everyone to watch these, all of these. Kathleen, Don,
yeah,
Chris O'Brien, every episode is
yeah.
special and unique.
I, I,
Moving
I
on here, we
go
got to
on.
keep going, Chris, or else we're never
Yeah.
going to get through it all. But
Mm,
we got to do here episode 20, and this is great. I think you may have done this one. Did you do this one with Mike? Episode 20, Shag Harbor, then and now deep dive. Was that with Mike
uh,
McDonald?
yeah, that was with Mike. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So Ron Halliday again says, looking forward to hearing your new information because there's a lot, you've dropped some hints here along the way throughout this whole
Yeah.
process of the show. There's always new information to be discovered. Case in point, I found out a few years ago that a couple of my older relatives had impressive UFO sightings in the Annapolis Valley the same summer as the Shag Harbor incident, but kept quiet about
Mhm.
it because of their standing in the community and or religious
Mm.
beliefs. I hope to talk to them this summer so I can get firsthand account or a secondhand account, and that would be lovely. But Chris, have you heard any of this stuff from the Valley?
Yes, I have. I recently was contacted by somebody that told me of something that came down and struck a tree. And, the next day there were a lot of people in like hazmat gear wandering around it, taking readings. And, when locals tried to question them, they were very dismissive of it like that, and they believe it connected with these sightings. I've also heard from somebody who used to own a store in New Minas that they were driving in bad weather and heavy rain, and they were between the communities. I can't remember which one now, Kenville and whatever, but this was back at that time, and something came very low over the car. They thought it was almost going to strike them. That looked kind of like the tumbling UFOs that were near some of those roadway sequences in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But this would have
Wow,
occurred back in '67. I've heard stories from that, and this is from business people that had clothing stores and that on Main Street. I remember.
doesn't
So
that sound
yeah,
cool?
yeah, there's certainly things that have occurred in the valley. Yeah,
Hmm. Next question comes from Edward. I won't pronounce the last name. You can read it. Good stuff. I live a couple
comes from
minutes from
Everett.
Shag Harbor, and so I find this to be particularly interesting. I've spoken to a few of the witnesses who are all getting up there in age now. I also spoke to a man who allegedly knew another man that had a firsthand account of the diver story and vouched for it. And this is something you know a lot about, Chris.
Yes, I've interviewed a lot of divers over the years, and
Mm,
yes, I can say just a little about this now because I think that what I've been hinting at, that's going to come out. I've done a lot of work, and I'm still waiting for a lot of government records on that. So I kind of don't want to shoot myself in the foot here, but yeah, the diver story. I've always believed the story, but I believe the story has lacked detail and has been tangled a little too closely with Shag Harbor. But I think that by October of this year, by the conference, I'm going to straighten all this out, that I finally gotten to the bottom of it after 29 years of trying to make that. So there's something to hang on for. You might see little tidbits come out here and that there, but this story is absolutely true. And there's a whole bunch of things. There was also there were many cases you don't hear a lot about. There was a landing case right around that same time in Quinnen in Yarmouth County too, that was seen from a distance. And I've run into many locals that say, I don't know anything about this. I don't know what happened in Shag Harbor. I don't know about the Shelburne case, but I'll tell you this. I saw a classic saucer land in Quinnen in the distance, and I just got the hell out of there. So,
Wow. Isn't that something? Moving on, we've got a few more episodes to cover, and this one is episode 21. Rob Switek, who you mentioned earlier, an estimate of our situation. Episode 21. This comes from Roger. Interesting question, because this was, right in my adolescence in the 90s. How did Bruce Maccabee get the Gulf breeze wrong? That whole era of
okay,
wedding.
I've met Bruce Maccabee a few times, and I haven't had a chance to quiz him about this, but I very much wanted to. But I think I can give some kind of an answer to this. Anybody
Mm,
who doesn't know, Bruce Maccabee was a member of the Fund for UFO Research, one of many PhDs. This was a group I said that gave me some funding to go to Ottawa in the beginning. I met him a few times. Bruce had a career as an optical physicist for the U.S. Navy. So how could such a man get this so wrong? Well, I believe what it is that Bruce looked at the data, he looked at the pictures, but what he didn't look at was the pedigree of the pictures. He didn't
hmm
look at the man and look into that. He simply looked at this data. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, when you look at something like that and somebody comes in here and says, look, this was a cookie that came off a UFO. Well, before I bite into the cookie or I just send it off for analysis, I'm going to want to know more about that person that gave me that cookie. I'm going to want to know under what circumstances, what time of day, et cetera, et cetera. And I think where Bruce went awry here. Now, I have not discussed him. I'm hoping to get the chance yet. We've met a couple times, and I would have loved to ask him, but I would venture that likely what it is you looked at the data, you looked at the pictures, you looked at what was given to you, but you did not explore the pedigree of it, you know?
Yeah,
And
and it's
you
pretty
have
clear,
to
right?
do
There's an
that.
object in those pictures, and, the controversy is, "Hey, look, we found models in his attic after the fact he moved out or whatever,"
Sure.
and
Yes.
but
Yeah.
him looking at those photos and saying, "Yeah, there's a real object in these photos," he's not
Yeah.
wrong.
Well, that's
So
right. You
anyway,
you got to look at what he said, and it was presented in such a way by editors and authors. I'm not trying to let Bruce off the hook altogether,
yeah.
not at all.
Yeah,
And
but that his
I'm
job was
hoping
to
that
analyze the pictures, that's it.
he did that. Yeah, but you got to do
Yeah,
more. You always got to
yeah,
dig.
exactly. Alright, so this one from the same episode comes from Michael Andrews, the Rob Switek episode. "I disagree. I believe the US government knows a hell of a lot more. I believe that they have craft or parts of craft, but I don't believe they know who or why they are here." And I think there's a lot of truth to this statement. So Michael, I think, has some background here too.
Yeah, we're talking a question degree. I don't want to just get into a war of semantics here. I,
Sure.
I do believe the government knows more than they're saying or releasing. They certainly have more data. I don't think
Yeah.
they have any of the big answers. Um, they know more than they're saying, but I
Mhm.
don't think they have the big answers. I don't think there's any treaties with aliens or any of this kind of thing going on. But
Mhm.
yeah, you know,
There's
when you
definitely
look
some
at
good
you,
footage, as you know. They've got some good
oh, there
clean
is,
pictures and
and
videos.
I'm sure they have some better footage too.
Oh, yeah.
And if the pressure keeps on, it might be leaked. But you know what? In the end, what are they going to tell us? What we already know? They're here.
Right. Yeah, and that's what everything, these ongoing studies and the open public dialogue is all about, is actually casting the net to get more data coming in. There's a reason for that. So here we go. We're going on to Ralph Lowinger episode Too Close for Comfort, episode 22 from Robin again, our friend. This had me on the edge of my seat. I felt it was inside that cockpit with Ralph and crew. Fantastic interview. This hit differently. He really drew me in. Give us some context, Chris, because this is wonderful.
Yeah, that was the intent here too. I think I might have said that at one point in it. We can't take you back in time, but we can put you in the cockpit, and Ralph can do
Yeah.
that. I would love again to do this someday with the other person who's still alive, which was the flight engineer who was in that cockpit, which is Michael Littlepage. Ralph did a
My word.
fantastic job. Don't want to take anything away from that, Robin and audience, but I can tell you something. Michael Littlepage, who was the junior officer in there at the time, when I first spoke with him, and all these years later, we had a bad cell connection, and he had to call back later. He was up in the mountains in Colorado, and when I finally got him on a landline and heard his voice, I could hear the emotion. I could hear it affecting him all these years later. I mean, Ralph put you there. Um, Michael is still there all these years later. But
Yeah.
yes, I agree. Look, Ralph and I become friends, and we keep in touch. And he tells a fascinating story, and it's part of history. You know,
Last
God
question in this
bless him.
episode really hits home with me because I agree with what's about to be read here. And it comes from Don Rowan. It says, "Thank you. Enjoyed the interview. Chris, I've heard you say a few times that Shag Harbor is the gift that keeps on giving, and I know that personally, Chris, because I follow you around. I sometimes you remind me of Stan Friedman. There's some really good catchphrases that always stick, and that's one of them. And now, as I listen to Ralph's account of the setup, the nods and the pokes, aka synchronicities that would appear in his life regarding his experience, I can only think of saying, "quote What we seek is also seeking us," unquote. I believe that too. That's I think Nietzsche said it best about the abyss staring back. The Shag Harbor story wants to be told. It is and will continue its unfolding. P.S. I'll be sharing the UFO conference info with my like-minded friends. There are many of us. LOL. Cheers and thanks again.
Yeah. Well, the universe is, I believe, not only stranger than we can imagine, but I think it's stranger than we can imagine.
Mm,
It's literally, it really is. And when you think about those words, uh, you know, we make some good guesses, we make some bad ones, but we're probably just around the edges of this thing, really. Um, but yeah, it's been, and this is the real payoff. And when I talk about Shag being the gift that keeps on giving, it's allowed me to meet and bring these people forward, to meet Ralph, to meet the people who are there, the people that have been up close and personal with the phenomena, the people whose lives, they've been transformed or transcended, or in some cases even held back by it. But you know, it's now part of them. As they would tell you, there was their life before that moment, and there's been their life since. And I think we owe them a debt that they have the courage and the persistence to come forward and tell their story and to share it with us and open our minds. And, you know, may it continue. May Shag keep giving. And what I really mean by that again is it's not just that it's a hub that brings these people forward, but it's that great case. It's a compelling argument for what I call UFO reality. They're here. We may not understand the mission, the point of origin, and the fact that I think all the unknowns have many different answers. But it's the gift that keeps on giving. It gives us insight. It gives us more. It proves that there is life after high school, and that there's a reason to look up and take those hands out of the pocket.
absolutely. Sean, just quickly, right before we get into the music of the show, I just wanted to paint it black and white for the audience. This whole concept of, the abyss staring back once we begin to stare into it. Let's just a quick story. This is it in black and white form. Chris has been researching this stuff for a really long time. I end up shooting my stuff in the South Shore for, another weird event in the town, which is already weird from 67 and way before that too, and continuing to this day. And I accidentally end up in this place based on a number of accidents. And then this thing shows up over me, which I film in high definition, which was the very first episode of the Forbidden Science UFO show. Chris, by looking into it all these years, and this isn't the only experience, but this is just to paint the picture, gets involved because I call him and he sees it too, right? So he's poking away at this stuff over the years. Eventually it pokes back, and this is just one instance where this really is the case. The longer you look into this stuff, the more likely it is going to look back at you. And there's lots of iterations of that, specifically in the four corners of the US with Skinwalker. And I think this about Southwest Nova too. This is another one of these strange, like it or not, portal areas where there's a lot of strange things happening. The universe is stranger than we can imagine. And to close out the show, we're just going to get into the music, Chris, because we could go on and on about that all day. You and I love this philosophy, Jim.
Yeah.
But in the music section, Roger asks, guys, who is playing the opening tune for the show? There was a bit of debate off air with us because it was written by somebody but played by another. What's the answer?
It was composed like on a program with by Michael McDonald. You know,
The other
who is the
producer
creator and
and
idea, the other
co-host.
producer of this show,
Yeah.
yes, an occasional co-host. Michael did it. Michael's a musician. You know, he plays bass, guitar, fiddle to an extent, right? But he composed this largely on a program, but I believe there's a little bit of real instruments blended in. But yeah, Michael's the guy.
Okay. And from Don Rowan again, good morning from Truro, Nova Scotia, rocking to the music, coffee in hand. This is my morning news. Thanks again, guys. Looking forward to this chat. We got one from Michael Andrews as well that says, love your podcast. Keep at it. Yours is one of the best from down here in the States, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kecksburg, the home of the Kecksburg UFO incident. I just love being a part of the show. The music is an integral part. If you watch every episode, you'll see either Chris and I bobbing at some point to it. So, okay, Old Man H, what's next? Chris, what's on the horizon?
Well, I don't know. We have some big guests coming up. We're on a summer schedule now where we're going to every 2 weeks because everybody wants to go on a picnic or go fishing, right? But I'm hoping to get some of the other guests that are going to be at the UFO Expo to come on. And I've got a wish list of what we're going to get at. And we'll just have to come back and see. It's going to be a little leaner in the summer every 2 weeks, but I'm sure in the fall we'll be back with the usual numbers, a few big names. But I'm going to tell you something. For people that have just skipped around to see their favorite researcher, watch the little names that you don't know. Watch them, as Justin pointed out, and some of the things that are revealed in these little episodes are the most significant things, right? And by the way, in science, in ufology too, you know, the word you want to hear, it's not the eureka moment, it's the, hey, that's odd. You know, when you look at your data, that's where the good stuff comes from.
Absolutely. And for me, if anyone even cares, in this little tiny town I'm living in Hampton, New Brunswick, I'm hoping to put together a little indie short film festival here for the public with two films that I've done. One about Heather Dowsett, a feature, a character in Chris's life and books about her abduction story that I've sent around the world. We won in Boston, and I think we were a finalist in LA. And another one I'm working on about a lady named Debbie Carew Cody, who watched a flying saucer hover across the street from her, and its little legs came out, and then in an instant it was gone. So all things UFO all the time. You'll find out more. I can't wait to get into more stuff with Chris because there's so much happening in the world right now. We've got a lot of great guests on the back burner. It's just a matter of percolating them to the top. So
hey, it's summer.
Thanks to everybody here.
It's summer.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for your interest.